Hi everybody, it's Coach Pete with academicrecruits.com coming to you today from Yates High School in 3rd Ward, Texas with Jawann McClellan, one of the great players to come out of Houston. He won a state championship in '04 with Milby and had a ton of scholarship offers and eventually wound up in Arizona where he had some knee problems. And now he's an assistant coach here at Yates as well as an assistant coach with Houston Select. So first question I got for you, Jawann, first of all, thanks for being here. I actually tried to recruit Jawann when he was in the 8th grade and I was at Episcopal High School back in 1999, so we go back a long ways. We unsuccessfully tried to recruit him, I should add. Like I said, he went to Milby. When did you first start getting recruited? When did college coaches when did you first get on their radar?
A little after my freshman year. I had a great summer with Coach Salinas for Houston Select. And I think my first letter, I can remember to this day, I got a letter from Baylor texting me the same day.
Did you play with the 17 and under team, or did you stay with your age group?
I stayed with my age group, and then I played with them for 1 or 2 tournaments.
Okay. You played up with the 17s 1 or 2 tournaments.
Yes, sir.
And you obviously played pretty well.
I did all right.
As the recruiting process started, did you do a lot of things to help yourself, or were you good enough that they found you?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think, you have to be good enough where they can find you, but I think you also have to be on the right team, the right situation. You have to have the right people around you these days. I had my dad around me that pushed me in the right direction. I think me being with Houston Select gave me a lot of exposure at that time. But also, I think you have to do a little recruiting yourself. My dad always put down what schools that I want to go to so we can know, GPA or whatever you need. It's not just the basketball. Everybody thinks it's basketball. But you gotta know what you need to get to a certain school and what they require, etc.
So you were doing homework, even though you were an All-American that had, I'm guessing, easily 50 scholarship offers.
Right.
You were doing work anyway.
Right.
You were making sure that you had the right classes. Exactly. You were in the clearinghouse early.
Yep.
How much did you, like when you got your first letter from A&M or Baylor, if your dream school was actually Vanderbilt, did you actually reach out to Vanderbilt and say, hey, I'm Jawann McClellan, this is my father George, and here's some tapes? Or did it not come down to that? Because you were pretty high profile from a pretty early age.
Right. I didn't necessarily have to call the school per se, but I would put it in someone's ear that I was interested as far as like Arizona. I knew Arizona and Kentucky were my dream schools to go to, and Coach Salinas, who was my coach at the time, I kind of told him, where I wanted to go if they offered. He had relationships, and it built so forth like that. But my dad, like I said, my dad was always there for me. He made sure I took the SAT as a sophomore, and a lot of things these days, a lot of kids have to worry about the SAT or whether they're going to be cleared, because they wait till their senior year. I didn't have to worry about anything like that, whereas I just went out there and played ball.
See, I think that, I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of times, if there's a high major kid with a horrible transcript, a train wreck transcript, a high major transcript, what we always called it, when we got one at Lafayette that was written in pencil, we said, this is a high major transcript. And the consensus is amongst the people advising the high major kids with train wreck transcripts is don't take the SAT early, wait to take it just one time, maybe the spring of your senior year, where we can get you some help, or maybe even in some cases get someone to take it for you. That way the NCAA can't red flag. If you have a real bad score and then a real good score, you get flagged in the clearinghouse and you have problems that way. But I agree with you. I think most kids, even with a horrible transcript, they took it as a sophomore and they knew what to do. They knew where they were deficient. They had time to work on it and correct it. I think they could eventually get right anyway without having to run the risk of getting caught in academic fraud like Derrick Rose cost Memphis a whole season. I think if his advisors had understood, let's have him take it as a sophomore twice, study for it, junior, I think he could have had the same results, but done in a way that wasn't fraudulent. Now, let me ask you this, because you advise a lot of kids. What are some things, when kids come to you and say, hey, coach, I'm looking at this school, what are some things you tell them as far as what's important in picking a school?
Number one is you're not trying to set your goals too high. First of all, what I try to do with every kid, I never lie to a kid. You always want to be realistic. So if your talent is Southland Conference, but you want to go to Texas or Kentucky, I'm going to tell you, you need to try to reach out to the Southland Conference. If your talent takes you to the SWAC Conference, then that's where you need to be looking. That's number one. Number two, we need to look at your transfer, see where you are, where your cores are at, so forth. Ball is the last thing that I'm concerned about, because at the end of the day, if you're good enough, like we talked earlier, they're gonna find you if you're good enough.
At that level.
At that level, exactly. Number four, like you said, you want to take the SAT to me as many times as you can. You know what I mean? That's just always been my personal opinion. That way, if you do pass it or get the score that you need, you're headache free. Like I'm dealing with Julian Lewis from Lamar right now. Trying to help him get the Texans. He's just so worried right now that he might get in, he might not. But whoever was dealing with him at the time had their head on straight, then he wouldn't be in this situation. And I think that the thing about me, what a lot of people realize, is that you can come to me and I don't look for nothing in return from a kid. I think that's the number one problem that we have with our society, whether it's parents, runners, handlers, whatever you want to say, that a lot of people put these kids in bad situations because they're looking for the almighty dollar sign at the end. And we say, I don't look at myself as trying to set kids up for failure. I try to just be 100% real with the kid, and hopefully, they trust in me and believe in me because I've been there and I've done that and played at the highest level. Unfortunately, got slowed by injury. But at the end of the day, I just want a kid to be successful in life, whether it's athletically or academically, because 9 times out of 10, it's only 1.2% of players that play for money anyway.
For real money, especially.
Exactly.
Now, let me ask you this, because we've had this conversation before. Sometimes you have a kid that has heavy interest from the Southland Conference and fleeting interest from, say, Conference USA. Or maybe in the springtime, there's late interest from a Missouri Valley school. But that interest comes late. And we've both seen kids that have slight interest from a higher level and a ton of interest from a lower level. And they think that one higher level interest, that's the school for them. Talk a little bit about the importance of understanding if signing a scholarship in November, everybody signs in November, but committing after an official visit in November is not the same as committing after an official visit in September. Signing in the spring, not the same as signing in the fall, because you get in a situation where you're almost like a leftover, and they might be recruiting over you before you even get started.
Exactly. I think a lot of kids, TV is the problem nowadays. A lot of people, they dream big, but like I said, they don't face reality. And you just hit it on point. They're usually schools are recruiting 7 guys for 3 spots or 3 guys for 1 spot, and they're usually, they try to string you along, and if the first 2 guys don't commit, then they look to you. Well, my thing is, you want to go to a school that loves you, You don't want to go to a school that likes you. You know what I mean? So, as far as if you have a Sam Houston State that's blowing up your phone, calling your phone, and then if you have a Tulsa calling you here and there, my opinion is that you go to Sam Houston State, because just like we touched on earlier, is that if you are good enough to play at that level, whether it's overseas or NBA, they will come find you. And it's always someone in the draft that comes from a small school that you've never heard of, or a lot of your best overseas players come from smaller conferences. So it's just it's up to you. Like even with the Big East, the kid Marshawn Brooks that came out of Providence, no one's heard of him. Averaged 24.6 points per game. Probably could have went somewhere else, Syracuse, but if he would have chose Syracuse instead of Providence, he might not be a first-round pick. Or the kid Alex Burks that went to Colorado, he probably could have went somewhere else, but he went to Colorado and made himself successful. Now he's the #1 pick. Same thing with Seth Curry. I don't take anything away from Seth Curry. He's a major talent, but let's say he went to Duke and instead of Davis, we don't know what might happen. Because you look at the situation with his younger brother that went to Liberty, I think, averaged 20 points per game. Now he's at Duke and he's just another role player. So it just depends on where you see yourself at the end of the road. That would be, my suggestion. What are your goals for yourself?
I think you're right. I think there are a couple of exceptions. If it's a great team, like when Corey Maggette was at Duke, they were great. When Corey Maggette was an elite athlete, I think he averaged 8 points a game as a freshman and was the number 12 pick. So there are exceptions, but you're right. I mean, the younger Curry, he's not going to get drafted, averaging 6 points a game at Duke. Whereas maybe if he stays at Liberty and averages 25, and you look at a Lionel Simmons way back in the day in LaSalle, one of the reasons he got so good is because he was the guy the moment he set foot on LaSalle's campus. So his playing time's up, his reps in practice are up, his reps in game, his touches in games are up, and so consequently his confidence is up. Where Lionel Simmons eventually felt like, I'm the baddest player in the country. If he goes to Syracuse in red shirts, maybe he never gets there.
That's what I tell a lot of players. You gotta look at, let's say I went to Arizona, and you average 4 points per game in Arizona. As far as overseas, they look at numbers. So like I said, it all depends on what you want to do. Whether you want to go and experience that at Arizona or Charlotte and beat them, or you can go to, let's say, what would you say, Texas State or something like that, average 18 to 19 points. Then all of a sudden, whoever your agent is, they look at that and they sell. Now they can actually sell you to a team, and especially if you make the NCAA tournament or you win MVP of the conference, whatever first team, so they look at stuff like that, and so now you start thinking about dollar signs, whether you want to make 80 or 90,000, 50,000 going to your rookie year overseas as opposed to making 100 or 120. So it all depends on what you want to do.
You look at J.R. Holden, who's like the Michael Jordan of Moscow. Right. He's a millionaire. He played at Bucknell. And at that time, they hadn't beat Kansas yet. Nobody had ever heard of Bucknell. But he had a great career there. And he had enough film of himself going against other Division I competition where he had really played well that a team in Russia gave him a shot. He played well, and now he's set for life. And again, sometimes when you step into a situation where the competition is a little bit over your head, rather than work your butt off to improve and meet the level of competition, instead you experience a crisis of confidence. And once your confidence is gone, you're basically done. Now, a couple more things before I let you go. I really appreciate your time. What are some things that you're in the game so much? You already touched on a couple of them. You got to set your expectations realistically. How many times does a kid completely screw himself by convincing himself, I'm D1? In the meantime, he's got a couple of D2s and a lot of D3s, but he's too arrogant to listen. Now all of a sudden it's April, the application deadlines are all passed on the D3, the financial aid money's all gone, and the D1's never offered. When you tried to tell them they weren't going to in September. So obviously the realism is important. You touched on the academics, which is huge. I feel like take the SAT early and often. I also feel like at most schools, it's a lot easier to make an 80 in a class than it is to make a 1200 on the two-part SAT. So don't shoot for a 70 to stay eligible. Shoot for an 80 or higher, so that way you have no issues whatsoever when it comes time to be recruited. Not only are you eligible, but you're a good enough student, the coaches can sell you to an elite academic school or more elite academic school. That'd be ironic if elite is not a word, and I used it in that context. But like Trinity, like if you're a B student, Trinity could look at you. Maybe Southwestern and Georgetown could look at you. Whereas if you're all C's, you're going to really limit yourself in terms of D3. So other than academically and being realistic, what are some things kids and families can do to help themselves moving forward?
Like you said, it's a lot of information. I think the number one thing that parents can do is ask questions. Ask the right people, have the right people in mind, and just be a good parent. A lot of these, that's the number one. You hit on parents, what can parents do? But the number one problem is there's not a lot of parents involved in these kids' lives, so they're leaning on someone else's shoulder for advice. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people like you and me out there that's giving these kids the best advice. The one thing I can tell them, like you said, be realistic with yourself. Try to do as best you can in school, but you don't want to, like you said, limit yourself as far as, whether you have to go somewhere on academics. My thing is try to get the most money as you can. That's all. That's what I try to tell my kids here. Try to get the most money as you can. Whether it's, if you can get Pell Grant, get Pell Grant. If you can get an academic scholarship and you might can go somewhere else and you think you're a D1 talent, maybe you can go there and get on as an academic scholar and walk on. You know it. I would just say, just don't set yourself up for failure. Don't just be average. Don't be an average person. Try to be the best you can be. That's what me and Coach Wise tell our kids. We make them run it. They make them run it. Now, unfortunately, we have some kids that are just not capable of meeting that expectation in every subject. We understand that some people are going to have weaknesses, But my thing is try to do your best. Don't limit yourself. Well, and I'm guilty of, you know, when I got to college, well, you know, it's an easy class, I'm just going to get the B as opposed to getting the A. And that's like you said, I think the first 3 years of your high school, really your 9th and 10th grade year, are the most important years of high school because, let's face it, your senior really doesn't count unless you're
colleges
late.
don't care.
Yeah, unless you're late, you know, trying to get in somewhere or something, or if you're, like you said, there's always an exception to the rule. If you're Derrick Rose or Julian Lewis, somebody that they're waiting on, you know, and go somewhere where you're gonna be happy. You know, if I had to do it all over again, me and Danny Gibson talking about this all over, we would go right over to U of H. You know, I think kids, they get so caught up in the school instead of, if you think you're that good, then why don't you go somewhere else and turn around the program? So,
well, that's the greatest trick the big boys ever pulled off is convincing kids that the school makes the player. No, sir. The players make the school.
exactly.
North Carolina didn't make Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan made North Carolina. That's the way it is. And you're right. If when Michael Young and Clyde Drexler, the good local kids, went to U of H, Final Four. U of H wasn't, well, they were pretty good for a while at that point, but they weren't a Kentucky or UCLA. And I'm sure those kids had the opportunity to go there. Last thing, Coach, talk a little bit about, I did a post today on honesty, where I explained that there's going to be some dishonesty in the process because coaches need backup plans. If they're too honest with the backup plan, the kids are going to be offended and not listening. And kids need backup schools. If you want to go to Texas, you might tell Rice or U of H, I really love you, you're right there in the mix, when really they're not. Because if you tell them the truth, which is I want Texas high major, I don't care about Conference USA, well, you might offend U of H and Rice, and they might look elsewhere. So the dishonesty is a two-way street. Just touch a little bit on that without, you don't need to get any specifics, but were you lied to in the recruiting process? Did you and the people around you tell some half-truths as well?
As far as the school that I picked, no. But some schools didn't tell the whole truth why I didn't go to their schools per se. But like I said, you know, I can get it out of it. There's going to be schools that tell you what you want to hear. And it's not just colleges, it's when you're ready to make that jump to the NBA, agents are going to tell you what you want to hear. Because at the end of the day, college coaches are trying to keep their jobs. NBA agents are trying to make money. That's what I tell kids, don't ever for one thing think that they love you like they do their own family. Because they don't really, technically, they don't know you like that yet. They're there to give you. That's what I always tell, and I have this, let's talk about the same team. I tell Clyde, don't you for 1 second think the coach is going to lose his job on Clyde Santee. And what I mean by that is that you get up there and he's not winning with you, they're going to bring somebody else right in on top of you. So that's the only thing, you know, coaches are going to tell you what they want to hear to get you on campus, but once you're on campus, you just like live bait. And that's why I say go somewhere where someone loves you for you and not for what you can just do on the court, but that's going to always have your back after you graduate. Because nowadays, especially with budget cuts and economic, trouble that we're having in the world, if you do what you're supposed to do under that coach and he really loves you, one thing about it is that you can always go back, hopefully, and go back to that coach and he'll help you out as far as your life. You know what I mean? And not just what you were able to do for him for 2 or 4 years, however long it's been.
That's so true. I mean, Bob Knight co-signs loans for his kids to start businesses. Mike Krzyzewski gets kids jobs like that. Dean Smith is probably the best all time at picking up a phone and making sure that his kids are taken care of. But not all coaches are that way. Believe me, I have friends who play college sports who they call back to their head coach for help with maybe a phone call if they got their resume out there, and sometimes the coach doesn't even call them back. So, well, I guess that's about it. I appreciate your time. Oh, one more thing. Talking about the advice. Here's a good general rule. If you're out there being recruited and you have handlers or coaches or whatever, if they're calling you to give you unsolicited advice, they probably have their own interests in mind. If you're calling them, asking their advice because you have that type of relationship, well, once you reach out to them and they're not chasing you, pretty good indicator that they're trying to do the right thing. So keep that in mind moving forward. And Coach, always good to see you.
No problem.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.